I appreciate you joining us for another brief look into God's Word. We're in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 this week, in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Today, we're going to look in verse 10. We've read the chapter. We read the chapter on Monday. If you weren't here for that study, if you didn't join us for that study, I'm not going to read the same chapter every day. But if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do that. But verse 10. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? We know where we started in verse 1. Knowledge puffs up, love edifies. Actually, that's tail end of verse 1. We know that we all have knowledge. We recognize an idol's not anything. We know that as well. Verse 4. Concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know an idol is nothing in the world. There's no other God but one. These gods that the Corinthians had worshipped before they became Christians, they are just so-called gods. For us, there's one God the Father. These idols, they're not anything. But not everybody has that knowledge. We'll say this, to look back at our pertinent verse, the one that I wanted for us to look at today, verse 10, if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple. Perhaps I am the weaker brother on this. I'll say this before I go any further. Do not take chapter 8 away from chapter 9 and 10. Read all three of them at least together. I won't even say stop at 10. You got to look at those chapters, and we have to look at this subject in context. So I wanted to preface what I'm about to say with that. You have to look at it in context. Maybe I am the weaker brother, perhaps, because the situation that Paul has laid out is, if someone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be emboldened, and thus to eat these same things, and thus defile his weak conscience? Maybe it's just me, but I'm going to say, what are you doing there? I understand an idol is nothing. I get that. I'm not saying the people in Corinth get that, but I get that. An idol ain't nothing. Aphrodite does not exist. It's just a slab of granite and granite columns all around, and everything looks real pretty, but there is no Aphrodite up on Mount whatever. There is no god Apollos. I get it. They don't exist. Still, what are you doing there? I don't think, and I think you can see this especially in chapters 9 and 10, Paul is not saying, it's no big deal if you go into the idol's temple. That is not Paul's point. And I think chapter 9 and 10 show that real clear when he says, flee from idolatry. That's what he says. He says, flee from idolatry. He says he does not want them, later on, verse 20, verse 19. Let me get over there. I want to read this one together. Hopefully I'm not getting on chapter 10 too soon. But look over in chapter 10 so we can be sure that we are not abusing chapter 8. You might notice verse 12. Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. That's in the same context of this whole conversation. Verse 14, actually back up. Back up a little bit. Why did those folks in Israel in days of old, why did they die? Why did many of them die? Verse 7, and do not become idolaters as were some of them, nor let us commit sexual immorality. What was going on in those pagan temples in Corinth? It wasn't just idolatry. Their idolatry was mixed in with sexual immorality. Verse 9, nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them were also tempted. All these things happened to them as examples. They were written for our admonition. Whoever thinks they know anything, whoever thinks he stand, take heed lest he fall. Verse 14, flee from idolatry. Then it gets into this picture of the Lord's Supper. The cup of blessing which we bless is not the communion of the blood of Christ. We're talking about fellowship. For we, though many, are one bread and one body. We're talking about fellowship. Observe Israel after the flesh are not those who eat of the sacrifices, partakers of the altar. We're talking about fellowship. And we're talking about how those who eat of the sacrifices have fellowship. Verse 19, what am I saying? An idol is anything? No, that's not the point. We understand they're nothing. There is no real Aphrodite. And what is offered to idols is anything? It's nothing. Okay, we understand that. But rather, the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Said all that to say this. These folks in chapter 8, they may think they know something, but they need to ask the question, you sure you love God? What are you doing there? What are you doing there? In this pagan temple where there are pagan prostitutes. I don't think Paul's point is, yeah, you can go wherever you want to go. That is not Paul's point. I think they need to slow down and they need to answer the question, because I think this is the question that their brethren had. What are you doing there? Are you sure you love God? Just answer just think about that question. What are you doing there? Why would you go there? This is, chapter 8 is eating meat in the temple. You know, there's a tie-in with doctrine as well. They were worshiping false gods in the temples. Why would you go there? Are you sure you love God? Or are you trying to compartmentalize? And what I mean by that is Sunday is the Lord's day, is Sunday God's day, and is Monday Aphrodite's day. Let me rephrase that. Is Sunday the Lord's day, and is Friday night Aphrodite's night? Are you trying to compartmentalize and maybe cover all your bases? Because that's what they would do in paganism. Right? You could go to any idol you wanted to. You could go to any god you wanted to. Well, maybe if maybe you're going, okay, we'll go to the Lord's house on Sunday, and we'll go to Aphrodite's house on Friday. What are you doing there? Are you trying to compartmentalize? Are you trying to make sure that you put God over here in one place and everything else goes over here? What are you doing there? What are you supporting? They were eating meat. And I think this point is going to be made in chapter 9 when it talks about, it does talk about the issue of support and how, frankly, preachers, those who minister, how those who minister are supported. Well, by going to the temple, who are you supporting? By going to the idol's temple, what are you supporting? Eating those things. What system are you upholding by doing that? It is not, maybe I'm the weaker brother and maybe I just don't get it. I don't know. But I'll tell you right now, you see someone going into an idol's temple, and what are you going to be thinking? What are you doing there? You're supporting them. And you claim to love the Lord? Does this not reek of hypocrisy? What are you supporting? Why are you there? I know I'm starting to repeat myself. Sorry. Why are you there? Maybe sometimes you find yourself in a place that you can't get out of. Maybe. And I understand later on it's going to talk about in the conversation about eating meat that sold in the market. And it says if someone says, well, this was an offer to an idol, Paul's going to say, don't eat it. They're trying to catch you, right? So you need to consider their conscience. But if nobody says anything, okay, it's just meat. But that's sold in market. And at least in my mind, and maybe I don't understand how Corinth worked, in my mind, I think I see that as a little different, the market, than eating meat in a temple, in an idol's temple. What are you doing there? Why are you there? You start seeing in chapters 8, 9, 10, you start talking about fellowship and unity, and it starts, they're worshiping there. They're worshiping false gods there. They're offering these things to false gods there. The false gods' ministers are there. All sorts of things are there. Why are you there? Why are you there? What are you doing there? Think about it. Like I said, maybe I'm the weaker brother and maybe I just don't get it. I understand an idol's not anything. But I don't think Paul's point is, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do. You sure you know what you're doing? Or do you just think you know what you're doing? Anyway, as an application for us, we may be able to go some places. Should we? All things are lawful, but all things aren't helpful. And we better make sure they're lawful. There's some places we just got no business going. Whether it's for others, considering their conscience, or maybe in reality, there's just some places we got no business going for our own sake, for the Lord's sake as well. Anyway, it's an interesting chapter. Don't pull it out of context. Don't pull it away from the other chapters. Otherwise, you might come to the wrong conclusion about what Paul's saying, perhaps. Anyway, appreciate you joining us. Appreciate you listening to me rant for a little bit. Hope you have a good day. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us.